Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm so glad to have you here to join me on today's conversation. Now, if you are new to the channel, welcome, welcome, welcome. And if you've been following me from day one, I just want to say thank you so much for all your love and support. Now, please be sure to like and subscribe and share this conversation with someone you love. That's the only way this channel grows, with your help. With that being said, let's get this conversation started. Hello, everyone. My name is Opie Fapore, and welcome to Conversations with Opie, a show dedicated to inspiring you to dream big, use your gift, and walk in your purpose. And my guest today embodies all that and more. She's a woman who dreams big and uses her gift, but also shares it through her work as an educator, choir director, and also the newest doctor of psychology. Congratulations, by the way, Miss Juliette Nelson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Now, I also forgot to mention, but she owns a lot of businesses, and this woman is a hard worker. And I'm just like in awe of you, of all the things that you've been doing. I've known you for a very long time, like a very long time now. But now it's getting to know you as who you are today, which is something that I would love to learn about as we go around our conversation. So tell us, who are you, Juliette?
Ooh, who is Juliette? Juliette is a woman who really lives on purpose and lives out loud. That's me. I live on purpose. I live out loud. I live authentically. And I'm ever evolving, ever growing, ever learning. And also just really on a path of constantly learning to step out with kindness, love, grace, and compassion for myself and for others. I would say that really sums up who I am, and really encouraging other people to do the same too. Creating safe spaces by which people can feel that they can step out as their best authentic selves. So that's me in a nutshell.
And the crazy thing about it all is that this is not something that you just, in a sense, discovered last week. This is something that you've always been. This is someone who you've been doing it from a very young age. I mentioned that you were a choir director. You started that at like 15 years old.
Yes,
right?
and we were actually doing this in high school.
Yeah. And even then I remember back in high school, you were like president of the Haitian club. You were always, basically embracing others and being someone that highlights and spotlights others. So this is something that's always been innately you. What inspired you to, or what is your why? How did you become this person as you've described?
I think my why is a couple of things. Primarily, I mean, my parents, I grew up in just seeing my parents always serving, right? My father is a preacher, not a pastor, a preacher. So, growing up, I grew up traveling with my dad to different churches, my dad evangelizing, preaching, and so on and so forth. My father's also a high school teacher. So you seeing your parent in just in service. My mother, she's a dietitian, and that's another thing, seeing how she served, and both of them really giving up their time, their resources to see others thrive. I think primarily that becomes my why, right? Seeing that example, seeing my parents do it. And I think being a child of immigrants, when you really, for me, I'm always in this state of gratitude and reflection, right? I think of my ancestors and I'm like, wow, I even think of my parents, my grandparents. I think of the sacrifices that they made, not knowing whether they'd see it for themselves, but knowing like, listen, it's worth it because my child's going to see it, or my grandchild, or my great grandchild. So that really becomes my why, knowing the sacrifices that other people made for me. And being inspired by that, and keeping in mind that someone else might be looking at me the same way, right? I don't have children, I'm not married or anything like that, but even my children's choir kids, right? My children's choir members, I've had people young and old come to me and say, wow, like you really inspire me to go back to school, or you inspire me to open my own business, or you inspire me to whatever it is. And I think, again, you know, my work, even if it's something I'm not able to see for myself, but at least I'm able to kind of set some kind of path, or give hope to someone else who really wants to go on the same journey. So I would say that's my why.
That's I, you know, I understand that why a lot. I think just as in a sense we kind of share a little bit of a cultural sameness, you know. As a Nigerian myself, I realized that okay, my parents are business owners. I fall into this like, no, you, in order to get what you want, you've got to work hard for it. It's not given to you. You've got to make the sacrifices and you've got to go after it. If that is truly what you want, you know, you can't,
Right. And I
you
want
can't
to
half
affirm,
do it.
and I want to affirm you too, Opie, because I mean, and I mean, like I'm the guest, but I do want to affirm you because, you know, I met you in high school. And of course, we kind of were like arm's length away from each other. I think we were two different grades. But one
Right.
thing I admired about you so much in this school where there were very little of kids that looked like us, of our skin color, and to see this girl, like every presentation, graduation, ceremony, you showed up full African garb. And I'm like, wow, wow, you know, and it takes a lot, you know, for you to be like, you know what, this is who I am. You know, this is my authentic self. You know,
Right.
this is who I am. This is where I'm from. This is what I'm about. And I find that was something that took me some time to be able to be like, no, this is who I am. And I'm going to step out with my purple or pink or blue hair. But I find that that's what causes people to really say, yeah, that is who you are. And that's what draws them to you, when you can be your fullest authentic self. And that was something I always admired about you.
Oh
You
wow.
know, me, other kid, yeah. And me being this other kid where it was hard, at least for me. That was one of my biggest challenge, navigating
Right.
being always the only Black kid, right? And you're in the honors classes and the AP classes, and you're
Right.
the only Black kid, right? Or it's one or of two or three. And,
Right.
you know, you can tell based on how they treat you or how they speak to you. There are those small little microaggressions where they make these references to who you are, your skin
Or
color, your
like, oh, you're not like the other kinds, you know.
right.
Right.
Whether it's consciously or unconsciously, and just to see how you constantly stepped out and you excelled across the board.
Thank
And
you.
honestly, I want to affirm you for that. I want to affirm
Thank you. Thank
you.
you. See,
No,
this is
you
what I'm saying about you highlighting and just this is who you've always been. Thank you. Thank you. I
I'm
really
cheering you on
appreciate
from the
that.
get-go, girl. Cheering you on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I truly, I see, I'm even lost of words now. I'm like, okay,
Oh,
get back into it.
right.
um, so we're going to get into this conversation. This is about you. And I
Yes.
appreciate that. Thank you so
And
much. Thank you. I remember, is it after you graduate college, you went to, you studied, not study, you actually taught in South Korea, right?
Mhm.
And that's where you got the name Nuri, which you actually combined with your company. And you said, I think in a previous podcast that I've heard from you, you mentioned that Nuri meant to share, which
Yes.
is what you are doing with your work and with your business. How much of that experience in South Korea helped to mold what you do today?
You know, ironically, and someone told me this, my pastor had given me this name. And I remember one of the Korean teachers saying, like, Juliette, yeah, this is really who you are. My mother would send me, and I don't know how they say it in English, but she would make like a marinade. In Haitian culture, you blend a lot of herbs, and that's what
Like
you
the
use
spices, right? What is it called?
and so on and so forth. We call it ipis in
Okay.
Creole.
Okay.
So my mother would freeze it and she would rush ship it to me in Korea. And you know, I would make rice. I would make every Haitian dish that's a Haitian dish. I had a Puerto Rican roommate at the time. She didn't cook as much, but in our house, we were eating Haitian food and she was eating good. It's wild because I would even prepare food for the staff. I would bring in, you know how it is. Like when you cook, you're not just cooking for yourself, you cook for aunts and uncles and cousins.
Absolutely.
So I would bring Tupperware to bring to other people. When people were sick, I was making that ginger tea. I was bringing it and making sure that, it wasn't just about me, but it was also making sure that the people that I grew to
Are
call
taken
family
care of.
are taken care of. So it was ironic that I got this name to share, and my Korean teacher's like, you always worried about everybody, trying to give somebody something, walking around with medicine, tea, oil, whatever it is.
I've got the solution for it. Are you okay? Are you sure you're okay? Let me take care of you. I got to make sure you're good.
Anything, hair products, whatever it was. But I'll just say, I don't know, again, it just goes back to having just a heart of service, where I know for myself, I'm an empath. And I'm not saying it just to say it. I'm a person who internalizes people's emotions, people's stress, people's happiness. And so that's
a lot of pressure.
And it is. And so I'm having to be selective of the spaces I step into, because I know myself. But it's to the point, like, I can be, another thing, the Korean War is still going on, but of course it's not an all out, active war.
Right.
And there was a moment where, of course, the leader in North Korea, he was doing a lot of his missile tests. So there was a big threat. And of course, the media makes everything bigger than it seems. So just to say, I'm going to the gym, I'm teaching, and people in the US are like, you need to come home.
Are you serious? What are you doing there?
Right. And so I'm okay. But at a point, I'm like, if everyone is panicking, maybe I should panic too.
Right.
And really, again, that just goes to show, for me, I love to see people thrive. I love to see people happy. I love to see the growth in people. I'm one of those friends, when my friends call me and say, hey, I called a therapist, or I started my therapy journey, I'm literally smiling and crying with them or rejoicing with them. Like, I am so excited for your healing journey, and it's gonna suck and it's gonna be hard, but when you get over that hump, it's gonna be beautiful. And so I think that really just informs the work that I do, really wanting to be able to see people strive, wanting to see people grow, wanting to see people excel. Life is so challenging and life is so hard. And to have a name like that to share, I know when I left South Korea, in my head, I was low-key trying to be like a K-pop star. I'm like, is this gonna be my artist name, Junuri? But that was something I really kept with me. Like, okay, I was given this commission to share my gift wherever I go. So what does this mean? And ironically, I've had so many experiences throughout my life, good and bad, that have really, I've had to look at them and sometimes want to ask why, but have to take just an extra deep breath and say, but why not? Right. I know when my best friend committed suicide, I remember someone coming to me and saying, would you have preferred he lived if you knew that his death would have saved 100 lives? And that was tough. That's really tough. That's a tough conversation to have with yourself about someone you care so much that passes away.
Right.
But again, I had to use that experience to say, all right, how do I step out with kindness and love and grace and compassion? How do I share that pain and that triumph, and that story of, you are going to be okay. And I won't lie, it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt and it's gonna be hard, but you're gonna be okay. How do I share that story with others and encourage them to continue on this path to healing, continue on this path to growth? Even with themes about mental health and mental wellness and psychological safety and so on and so forth. I tell people that if nothing else, you have yourself to live for. Right. I think sometimes we like to say, oh, well, you have your mom and you have your kids and you have your siblings and your friends and so on and so forth. But if you remove all of those things, and I'm spiritual, I'm Christian. So, Christ died for you too, right? Everybody else, yes, but you matter too. And you have to also see that value in yourself. You have to know that, yes, it's okay to live for myself. It's okay to chase my dreams and so on and so forth. So I think with the name Nuri, everything that I do, I think I just strive to share those messages and share those messages of hope, share those messages of pain, to say like, yeah, I'm human too, and I go through human things. And it's okay if you don't know everything. It's okay if you fall. It's okay if you hurt. It's okay if you go through pain, but it is also okay for you to heal. It's okay for you to learn. It's okay for you to grow. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you in so far that we've talked, you've talked about your parents and how they've been your why. You've talked about your late friend, which I am so sorry to hear about. And you actually dedicated your book, Sharing My Lens, to
You have
them.
the book.
Yeah, I've got the book. And I mean, this is one of the ways in which you, like, I'm going to read the dedication. It says, to my parents, Daniel and Juliette Nelson, who are my why, to my students and choir members who are the motivation behind me achieving my purpose and releasing this book, to my late best friend, Henry, who would have been proud if he were here today. This is, I mean, you are explaining exactly one of the reasons why you're sharing your gift, because you've realized that this life is so short. Like, you have to live life to the fullest, and you have to live life because of you. You know, people don't like to use the word selfish, but you have to be selfish at times to take care of yourself, to look after yourself. Tell me more about how you even got to this. Like, where did you come up and like, you know what, it's time to write a book about my college experience and to make it better for someone else?
Right. So let's be clear. I didn't like school. Okay. We already talked about the fact that we were the one black dot in our classes. I like school. I'm here for it. I was in IB, the International Baccalaureate Program. I tried to quit. I did. My guidance counselor snitched. I think it was Mr. Cardizano, that was the head of IB. He snitched, called my mother, called me into a meeting, and they're like, yeah, you're not going anywhere.
You're not quitting. No, that's not in your vocabulary. Sorry.
You're doing a full program, okay? It's some sacrifices you don't have to make, and you don't have a choice, okay? But I think it's when I got into my my graduate program to do my master's in business administration. And this is when I was actually working with business owners. Like, I'm now in corporate. I'm now working in an office setting. So I'm able to apply what I'm learning. And so I'm finding that I'm a little bit more passionate about what I'm learning, right? Because I can apply this directly. I can use case studies from what I'm experiencing hands-on. And I remember an international business or some type of course, and my professor, ironically, who reached out a few days ago, but my professor, who was like, what is your learning style? And he went and broke down the different learning styles, right? And I think it was at that point where I was like, what is my learning style?
Yeah,
right?
Now I'm curious. I gotta go figure that out myself.
Girl, it will change your life forever and ever. Right. But that really planted the seed. And at that point, I didn't know I was going to write a book. But I actually sent him a message during the week, and I was like, oh my goodness, like, this is what helped me join this path to really wanting to learn and know more, and really making my academic experience so much easier, so much more seamless in spite of the challenges. But some years later, someone had approached me about writing a memoir about my life. And I remember just getting the information from them and telling them I would follow up. And I remember at some point I was in my bathroom. I remember just standing, I think facing the mirror or something. And I was like, oh man, I got to call that girl who reached out to me about the memoir. And I heard a voice that was like, you're not even ready. That's not your testimony. I was like, what?
What do you mean?
And then the voice was like, that's not the person who's going to share your story. So now I'm sitting here like, what am I supposed to tell this girl? What am I supposed to tell her? You're just supposed
to tell her, I'm sorry, but you were just a messenger, but someone else.
And really, they were like, it was like, you're not ready for this. You're not ready for this. You don't know your testimony yet. And literally, I think I was perhaps a year into my PhD program.
Okay.
And it was literally at the next month, that following month, that I heard that voice, had that epiphany that life in school became so challenging. And that's where I saw like the testimony begin to unravel. And I think that was 2019. Later on, someone else is supposed to tell my story. Is it going to be me? Who is it going to be? And when is the time? And I was sitting with one of my mentees, and we were just chit-chatting about all the things we wish we knew going into college. And that's when the light bulb went off. And for me, of course, we took college classes in high school. So perhaps it was a little different from someone who didn't take college classes. But I know I reflected back to when I was in high school, where it was like we had to learn to write at a college level. But when we had to prepare for state exams, you still had to go back to this standard way of writing that is not preparing you for college.
For college.
It's not.
Absolutely.
And even taking those college classes did not prepare you. It didn't give us the discipline. It didn't give us, there was a lot that it just did not give us. I know when I
pretty much learned how to kind of you were taught how to like pass a test in a sense, but not necessarily how to learn loving and love to learn, you know, like, oh, wow, this is actually something I want to do. I'm passionate about it. It was just like, okay.
And it was a lot. It was a lot of
C. You do an A, B, and C, and you're going to get exactly the grade you need to get.
And it was hard. It was hard. Like, you know, you go to college and you're like, wait, we had 12 periods in high school. So it's like, I had all of this stuff in high school. Every day I was taking all of these subjects, and in college, they're only recommending 3 to 5 at a time. And so, you know, and I failed one course, my first semester in high school, because coming out of high school, I needed a break. So I slept a lot, you know, I hate to say.
And you wake up so early too. And which is really interesting though, actually, because in high school, you wake up super early, but then by the time you get to college, at least after the first semester, you're like, wait, 8 a.m. classes, like, even though you were doing that back in high school, you just can't do it.
I was eating chips, drinking soda, having like virgin pina coladas for breakfast, because I was like, something's got to give. I got to stay awake to make it. But, you know, when I reflect back on that and how challenging that was, you know, and I even think about how we raise children, even us, they don't ask you what you want to do when you grow up. They ask you what you want to be. And so we're attached to these titles. I want to be a nurse. I know in Haitian culture, I hear the same thing in African culture. A nurse, doctor, engineer, lawyer. If you're not any of the above, you failed. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I've been grateful to have the parents that I have, honestly, because Absolutely. You know, there's the stereotypical thing, just like you said, like in Haitian culture and Nigerian culture is like you have to be, you have to be doctor or lawyer. Like there are those prescribed engineer. Those are the path you have to go. But yeah, my parents have always been the people to be like, you can be anything you want to be. You just got to work hard at it. Like, it doesn't have to be the prescribed, you know, path. You know, even themselves have not gone on the path as defined by society. So people look at them weird. They look at me weird. I'm like, okay, we'll be weird together.
I made it. Right. And so for me, I think that's another gap that I find where we're not really taught to learn about ourselves, right? And I speak about that in the book, self-awareness, know yourself, know thyself, you know, understand how you function, find a way to create a learning environment that works for you. You know, I remember going on tours way back when I wanted to be a lawyer, when I was going to be the family lawyer. Let's all laugh together. But you know, I remember visiting law schools and they had these big lecture halls, and I was very much intimidated and I didn't understand why I was so intimidated. And I remember doing different personality assessments, and I realized that I am more introverted than extroverted. And so I need a lot of time. Yes, you'd be surprised. I need a lot of time to really, and it's not even more from a shy perspective. It's more that I need time by myself, so that I can recharge and then go out into the world. And so when I learned that, that's where it clicked that I have no business in a lecture hall with 120 students. My preferred learning style is not auditory, right? I am paying attention. I am hearing and I'm listening. But what I've kept from what you've said and what my ears have taken in is very little. Like 10%. Right. I'm a visual person. So if you told me something and then you sent me charts and graphs and whatever, now when I look at it, I can compare it with what I've heard and it makes sense. So with that, I really said, you know what, in the book, I want to make it so that students have a little bit more control over their academic journeys, right? Where there's a little bit more self-awareness, where they understand the importance of reading and writing and public speaking and so on and so forth. You know, sometimes we're in high school. I remember being in IB in high school, these college classes. I'm like, what are we doing? How is the Pythagorean theorem? Don't help me count my money after high school. How? It's not gonna do that, right? But imagine if there were more practical or more real life examples, right? If I knew that if I wanted to be an architect or an engineer, that Pythagorean theorem that I can barely pronounce now, it would apply.
It would apply,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
What about history classes? You know, especially where, I sat in classes where there was very little. I remember seeing one sentence in our textbook about the fact that Haiti was the first Black independent republic around the world. And it didn't click until I graduated and I minored in history. And I was studying African civilizations and Latin American history. And so
it's like you have to go out of your own, you have to make the own decision to study, to learn about those things, or you have to be, or how are you exposed to it? Like if you're not exposed to it, then it's not going to be, you're not going to know.
Absolutely. And imagine if we just knew that it was so valuable, that if you paid attention in history class, at least it prepares you to be involved in being more active, to be involved in social activism, to understand the importance of voting or being involved in politics, you know what I mean? Part of the community in that sense.
Yeah. And I guess, in a sense that goes back to, like you said, knowing yourself, or knowing what you are passionate about at a younger age. In a sense, it's like, it's very hard to see, like, at what point do you teach, for example, the learning styles, or how do you fit that into the education system? Because like, I know that growing up, I loved math and I loved history. So history was something that, like, no matter what classes I picked, I was in AP government. I was like, those were the things that drew me in, because that was part of my passion. So I said, you know what, one day I want to be a leader in the community. Let me learn about the process. But if you don't know yourself, or even are introduced to that, then you don't even know that you are passionate about it, in a sense.
Absolutely.
You're not aware of those things because it was never exposed to you.
And it's a big challenge for I think for a lot of us, for all of us, you know what I mean? Like, I remember asking, and this is something I do with my students. One of my students, when I first started working with him, he could have been like the second grade. And I said, what do you want to do when you grow up? And this is a boy who loves video games, and he loves Fortnite. This is the background. He loves Fortnite. And I would say, what do you want to do? Not what you want to be, but what do you want to do when you grow up? And he said, I want to play Fortnite. I said, what? He said, I want to play Fortnite. I said, forever? He said, yes. And he don't care. He is in this lesson because his parents told him he has to come to this tutoring session, and he is waiting for me to be done so that he can go and complete
Fortnite.
And play Fortnite and get it to whatever level he needs to get. And that was every single lesson. Like, he's like, listen, I told my friends are waiting for me. You have 15 minutes. Okay. Like, this is what it was. And I remember saying, have you considered maybe creating games like Fortnite for other kids to play? And that piqued his interest. I have taken him to the back end of my website so he can see all the codes. I don't know what they mean. I know nothing about codes, but for him, it's like, oh, that's cool. And I'm like, that's what they use to build the video games.
Right.
And I tell him, when you learn your reading and your math and your whatever, that's the one thing that'll keep him. His reading that's how you do those codes. That's how you do it.
He's like, let me pay attention so that I can build code so I can make games.
Right there. But that's how you make it practical for a kid. If you want to be an astronaut, yes, you can be an astronaut. But how do I make math and science and technology, how do I make that practical, right? You wanting to be involved in your community. How do I use history and public speaking, right? How do I use all of those things? Even, I don't know, science classes, understanding how the body works, right? How the brain works, how the mind works, the fact that people are capable of growing, right? If I had a certain bias now, when I'm able to learn, I can also unlearn the things that have blinded me from, that have maybe cluttered my lens. So things like that. I think there's a different way for us to really approach learning and teaching, maybe. I celebrate our teachers. Okay. This is not a blaming game, but I do feel like there is opportunity to really take a more practical approach.
There's an opportunity to grow. I don't think we've reached the height of our best education in a sense, like we should always leave room that we can be better than we are. Yes, we're great, but can we be greater? And that's sometimes a hard pill to swallow for people. I think it sometimes deals with your ego, deals with like, how dare you correct me? I know better. And at times you really have to learn to, my parents say this all the time, you have to learn to be stupid sometimes, Doesn't mean that you don't know it, but you just got to put yourself in a position where, let me learn so that I can be able to do things better, because there are
Absolutely.
other ways to do it.
I remember a pastor saying, you don't stop learning until you die.
Mm.
And honestly, for me, that's what it's gonna be. I might go back to school, y'all. I feel like school is that abusive boyfriend that you, and it's a horrible analogy, but it's that abusive boyfriend you can't stop going back to. And that's school. And I'm gonna go back. But
you gained something from it. You've been getting something from continuing your education and giving yourself the opportunity to grow.
Absolutely.
So I think that's obviously it like you said, it's hard to tell yourself to get back into this mode of learning. It's not an easy, and also life is filled with so many responsibilities now. As a kid, your only focus is go to school, but now you got to do so many other things.
That's the thing, you can still learn, and I think we have this mentality now where it's like you don't have to go to college to start a business or to this or to that. But the thing about it is, okay, when you compare yourself to the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Bill Gates who dropped out, they dropped out of number one Ivy League schools. Let's start there. Number two,
let's finish the story.
Right. These people are reading like 100 books a year, right?
Exactly.
They're still pouring into themselves. So the knowledge that they have is equivalent to that degree that they dropped out of. They didn't stop learning. Yeah. And I think we also need to emulate that. Hey, if you're not going back to school, pick up a book, get you some YouTube. There's so many, now with technology, there's so many ways to engage.
There's public library. I feel like people don't take advantage of public libraries enough. Like, all that information is out there for free. So you don't necessarily need to have go there, do the physical work of checking a book out. Well, get a library card, then checking a book out. And you're so right about that. We have to finish the story. It's not just about, I'm not going to further my education. No, you are furthering your education. You just have to take the steps to do it in a different way, in a different path.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's get into your other business. Like, you have, other than Junuri, which is focused on, like you mentioned, tutoring and connecting, basically an education program, I should say. Mm-hmm. Now let's flip to Junuri Lens. Like, how did you, Junuri Lens, how did you get into that?
Oh my gosh, Nuri Lens is my problem child. I think a lot of it started in Korea, of course. So when I was in South Korea, I discovered that I can purchase a pair of glasses for like $20, prescription included. And I was like, what? Okay. So I got one. And then I had another $20 to spend. I was like, matter of fact, I'm gonna get another one. And then I had another $20 that I was like, yeah, I'm gonna spend. And all of a sudden I started building this repository, this collection of frames. And really, when I was in Korea, I think the joy with living in a foreign country is you don't really feel as pressured to fit into some kind of a box. You're a foreigner, you're exotic. So it's like, who am I impressing, right? I want to learn about this culture, right? I want to learn about the culture. I want to appreciate it. And that's something I absolutely did. But I think the nice thing was that I didn't have to fit in the mold of a Black woman or a Haitian person or whatever. I could just be myself. And so you have people with frames, eyeglasses in different shapes and sizes and whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay. So, I started mixing up colors, and I was now I can mix them up with my hair and outfits and so on and so forth. And people even mention it. They're like, I noticed that you wear this same color with this same hair color. But back then I was like, oh, okay, this is affordable. When I started Junuri, I actually prayed a prayer, and I jokingly said, God, the next pair of glasses I buy is going to be one I design. And my first logo actually for Junuri was a pair of blinged out frames. I wasn't offering glasses. I was offering learning and development coaching services. That's what I was doing. But I needed to stay true to these frames. And I don't know if that was my way of like writing the vision right
manifesting
there. Right. And just like speaking it out. But, I remember sometime after that, maybe a year or two after launching Junuri, I was purchasing a pair of frames for a gamer. And that's where I discovered that gamers wear blue light blocking glasses because they spend hours upon
Hours in
hours
front of a screen.
in front of a screen. And I was like, wait, I'm serving students and professionals. I can serve them with these blue light glasses too. And so I think that kind of jump started everything. And then eventually I'm like, nope, we need to find a lab to fill prescriptions because I need to be able to serve customers who need prescription.
Who actually need glasses to see.
Right, right. Because I wasn't about to design frames and I can't wear my own frames. And then, that took off. And I really don't even know how wood became a thing. I think maybe in just like trying to look at what was out there, I was like, wood might be pretty cool. And then I think everything about wood, the sustainability, just the spiritual meaning behind it, of knowledge, of longevity, of wisdom, of growth, like a tree that's deeply rooted and just grows and evolves and weathers every storm. It was like all of these messages now became embedded in this brand without me even realizing. And I mean, the rest is history. The rest is history. Here I am with a wooden eyeglass eyewear collection.
Yeah. What's the name? What's the name of the frame? The one that you're wearing?
I am currently wearing Montego Bay.
What is the inspiration behind the names? Because I know that they're named after like different. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the team, we just looked at them and we're like, okay, at first it was like, what kind of vibes does this give you? And I knew that I wanted the frames to be named after places that represented myself, my history, my story, but also the identity of my friends and my community and those around me. And I think that's where it started. And then the team, of course, great minds putting their ideas together. All of a sudden, these Montego Bays, we're like, oh, this gives us Jamaica vibes. So we're like, okay, Montego Bay, it's art, it's culture, it's music, it's all of that. And this is our best seller. And then we have another pair, 1804s, which is named after the year Haiti gained its independence.
Became independent.
And I kid you not, people purchase the frames, not only because of how they look, but because of the name.
Right.
And I didn't realize that it was going to be such a big deal. I've had Haitians come to me and say, oh my goodness, I purchased a pair of Montego Bay frames, but I am ashamed as a Haitian that I did not purchase a pair of 1804s. I've had Africans, and it don't even matter which country in Africa you're from. You hear of the Cairo frames, you're like, God, I'm getting them frames.
Everyone's representing.
That represent the motherland. Yeah. And honestly,
I would be looking out for the Lagos frame just as a Nigerian, just putting it out there.
I got you. I told myself, I said, when I get married, I feel like I want my to be made in Nigeria. Matter of fact, I'm going to take the whole wedding to Nigeria because y'all, it's always a party. Y'all just celebrate. It's Sunday.
No matter what we do, we like to just put our best in it. If it's going to be party, we're going to party hard. If we're going to study, we're going to study hard. That's just how we do.
Right there. Yeah, absolutely. I will keep that in mind and I will send that as a tall order.
Send that to the creative team.
Yeah, but that's really the inspiration behind the names for our frames, really paying homage to history, to culture. And I think that's another way of really encouraging people to step out as their best authentic selves. Right. The slogan for the brand is "See through the lens of your purpose." And I'm inspired by this biblical verse, Habakkuk 2, verse 2-3, that says, write the vision, make it plain, so that they who see it can run with it. And even if this vision seems far away, do not worry because it'll happen at an appointed time. So it's like when you put on these frames, and I don't have the case next to me, but when you put on these frames, it's like the case looks like a treasure chest. I'll show you it. It looks like a treasure chest. There we go. Oh my goodness. So it looks like a treasure chest. This is the Eyeglass case. And it's like you're stepping into this experience and you're stepping into this treasure. And when you put on your frames, you envision your purpose, you envision your goals, your dreams, and so on and so forth. And you strive to grow, you strive to evolve, and you always step out as your best authentic self. And that's the message that I push through Nuri Lens. And I'm grateful because there are people who, they usually wear their safe eyeglasses, and I find that they'll come and they'll say, you have no idea. When I wear these, I feel like I'm $1,000,000. Like people can't talk to me. Right. And it's the shyest person, the most reserved person, the most to themselves person. But that warms my heart because in a sense, it's this person who's like, you know what? It's okay for me to step out as my best authentic self. It's okay for me to live out loud. It's okay for me to live with color, live boldly, and really not care about what everybody else
what everyone else has to say.
Yeah.
Where do you think the fear of people not being themselves or living life to their best self comes from? Like, why do you think people are so afraid to do so?
I think we establish status quos, and status quos that look very perfect or near perfect. And so there's the fear that people's perceived imperfections will be revealed in a world of imperfect people that are not evidently imperfect, if that makes sense. So if I know that it's a bunch of people with blue and purple and all these crazy colors of hair, it's a normal thing for me. It's very normal, right?
Right.
But if everyone has black hair, right, and everyone is complimenting and saying black hair is so beautiful and so on and so forth, and I take the risk and I change my hair color and everyone's side-eyeing me, that makes me uncomfortable. And if somebody else wanted to do the same thing, they're like, oh, that's what happened to her?
I want to avoid that.
No, ma'am. And I think it's the same thing with therapy. You know, people who go through mental illnesses, I think oftentimes what fuels those feelings is the fact that you are alone. And the moment you see someone who survived and someone who says, yeah, I attempted suicide, right? Or I had a mental illness, or I had this experience, or I had that experience, and I'm here. Then you're like, wait, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. But again, you had to see somebody else.
That representation has to be there for you to think
right.
that it's possible for you to do so.
Right. And there's no such thing as normal. I don't think we accept that though, right? I've had people come to me and say, well, there's a standard for how you should do your hair. And I say, according to who? According to who? And you can tell me.
Where's the rule book? Bring it out for me. Tell me what section it's in.
And you can name a church on a block. You can name an organization. You can name a company. And I'll say, but okay, we have another company that does it. We have another, you know what I mean? Like according to whose standards, right? And when you find that it's really people who accept something as the norm, and sometimes because they don't even feel safe within themselves to step out of that norm. When you understand that, you're like,
yeah,
we're all on the same boat. It's all right.
There's not enough of questioning of why something is. It's more of a acceptance of, okay, well, everyone's doing it, so it's okay. There's no need for me to step out of it. Wow.
Yeah.
So we've talked about Junuri, we've talked about Nuri Lens. I heard about a program that you're creating. It's a Haitian Creole learning management system. Tell me a little bit about that. What is it about? I want to learn some Creole. So how do we get into that?
So Voisin. Voisin is, yes, it's a Haitian Creole language learning management system. Another one of my problem children. So right now we are currently on Instagram. We've been able to attend a couple of events and have great conversations with people. We started recording a podcast and then COVID happened. Thanks, COVID. But honestly, so me being an American, right? American, born in this country, child of Haitian parents. My business partner having been born in Haiti, right? Growing up, knowing that culture in that sense. Both of us identified gaps where it was like, when it comes to the language, there's not a lot of awareness among our culture as well as the diaspora, and those outside of it on Haitian Creole. Right. There's always this association that it's French slang, which is very not true, or patois or whatever. And it's like, no, it's its own language with its own rules and structure and so on and so forth.
Right.
And for myself as well, growing up in the United States, I found that there are not enough language resources for people who want to learn Haitian Creole. For myself, growing up, I hung out with a lot of the ESL kids. So while some might see that as a disprivilege, I find that as my privilege. The ones that didn't speak English, and I had to adjust. And I've been able
Learn
to
from each other.
we learned from, they taught me Creole and I taught them English. But I'm grateful because I was able to really maintain that. And I've grown to have a love for speaking languages. But what about a kid who doesn't, their parents don't speak as much Creole to them at home, and so on and so forth. So we wanted to create resources by which Haitian Creole learners could get a comprehensive approach to Haitian Creole, right? The same way you learn French and Spanish, right? You get vocab, you learn verbs, you learn present, past, tense, and all that. We want to create that same experience for language speakers, and also create opportunities for people who already speak Creole, because you'll find, and that's what I've learned, that oftentimes when you want to learn something else or another language in Haiti, you're not reading a book in Creole that's teaching you English or teaching you French or Spanish, right? You have to learn French first, or Spanish first, or English first,
before you can
so
learn what it is you want to learn.
Right. And so we're trying to explore what it looks like when we can create resources that are in Haitian Creole, where you don't have to always, if you want to learn French and English and everything, cool. But you don't have to be able to get the learning resources.
That's crazy. That's wow.
Yeah. It's a lot of, and again, it's like for a language that has a structure and so on,
that there's actually not enough resources in that specific language. Wow.
Yeah, and when you do the research, it's like it's wild how, and it's crazy because everybody speaks Creole differently. And this is not a dialect thing. People write it differently. The rules have changed. If there's a new rule in English or a new spelling, every curriculum is implemented.
It's yeah.
The
AP style book is updated with everything.
Yeah, and there's a pride part of it, right? I'm not going to use this letter in my writing, or I'm not going to adopt this grammatical rule, or so on and so forth. But then it also goes to like the social awareness and appreciation for the language. Mm-hmm. We also still exist in a culture where at a funeral, at a wedding, at church, and so on and so forth, people would prefer to speak French because it makes them feel
it's
that
a more elite language.
Right. When they pray, that's the joke. When they do the parodies for Haitian parents and how they pray, they're all in French. They're all in French. And even though you don't understand French, those few French words, right? And so really, we want to we're really working on it. I'm hoping that we can have the launch of our full curriculum this year, but the goal is to really increase this awareness and appreciation for Haitian Creole. And, maybe that might open doors for other languages as well. Mm-hmm. You'd be surprised how embedded, the Latin languages as well as African dialect is embedded in our language. And I feel like that's another thing. We do not emphasize that enough, right? We have roots in Africa. It's not just
there's a lot of cultural like similarities in, and like I've seen myself.
Right. I've been told that Haitian Creole there's a lot of alignment with Ghanaian, the language spoken in Ghana.
Okay.
That's what I've been told. Okay. And even when they emulate the accent, it's very similar to
a Ghanaian accent.
Yeah, the Ghanaian accent and Haitian Creole. Mm-hmm. So for me, I'm like, no, I want to know what's going on in the motherland. Like, what y'all got? What y'all got over there?
There's a lot of history when we go back and we see, like, sometimes even I've learned, for example, like a lot of Nigerians are actually like in Brazil. There's a lot of foods of ours that you can buy as street foods there too. And it's just like, wait, this is a consequence of history of what we know. So, but this is why that we're more alike than different. If we see where everything is separated and how this was done to separate us. This was done to make us feel like there's no one else out there looking out for us, you know? And that's the division that unfortunately we see here. But it's people like you, it's people like us that have to keep reminding that there is a reason why we need to publicize something like this, you know? This is the reason why we have to keep our culture. This is the reason why we have to teach our children about who we are. Don't be ashamed of who you are. You don't want it to die out. You don't want to feel like you're the only one left and no one else understands, because there's a lot of people that do. There's a lot of us.
We are beautiful just as we are, you know. Absolutely. I don't want to sound woke, and I don't want to come up with all the theories and whatever, but unfortunately, you know, we're almost, whether you are a direct diaspora of Africa, whether you stopped in the Caribbean, or whether you landed in the America, whatever it is, unfortunately, we are a product of almost being stripped of our identity and who we are. And, you know, we're forced to celebrate other identities and almost elevate those as if those are better than ours, right? And for me, I think over the past few years, especially in my self-reflection, is saying like, no, Creole is a beautiful language. You know, whether you from the country or whether you from the city, however the pronunciation is, it's still beautiful, you know, and it's not rolling your R's a certain way in the French way. You know, that's where my ancestors came from Africa. You know what I mean? Like, that's what makes it so beautiful. And for me, I choose to celebrate that. I choose to celebrate the fact that, no, it wasn't just the slave masters who tried to make something out of whatever the slaves were speaking. It was the slaves who came with their culture and in all of its beauty and its glory, right? And made something beautiful out of that, you know, of what we see as Jamaican
make something beautiful out of a situation that wasn't at all close to being beautiful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, so I choose to celebrate that.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I forgot to ask, what does Wazan mean? What is that?
Wazan means neighbor. And I don't want to ruin the whole story because it's on the podcast, but Wazan is actually named after my business partner's late teacher, who I think she was his neighbor. And so when she saw that he was in her class, she made it her business to make sure that he was always involved, and that she also taught him Haitian Creole the right way.
That's
so the name
like
is an homage to her. Yeah.
Wow, that's perfect. I love that. That is.
It's very simple, but it's neighbor. That's
I mean, but the story behind it, like that, it means something. It's not just It's just not just a name, you know, there's more to it.
Absolutely.
So we've talked so much about everything, and I feel like we could go on forever, and there's just so many things to learn more about.
It's like two friends.
Right. It's just like, so what about that? Right. But I want to end on this note. I want to know, and you've mentioned this before, but I just want to kind of go back to it, as in, what is your purpose and how would you advise others to find their purpose?
My purpose is to empower others to step out as their best authentic selves and to create safe spaces by which they can grow and by which they can evolve, which also leads to them being their best authentic selves and leading lives of purpose and impact. That is my purpose. And encouraging people to be kind to themselves.
So how would you advise someone that doesn't even, like, how do I even find my purpose? I feel lost. I don't know where to begin or how to even define it.
So your purpose is more like an objective, right? It's more like a do. It's more like a not a who, but a what, right? So I would say maybe tap into your experiences, the good, the bad, the high, the low. Tap into those things that you find yourself getting the angriest about, the more passionate about, right? The more frustrated, the happiest. And in that, you'll find that there is this common theme of things that you do to make the world a better place. And I would say that's what, I know there are books and so on and so forth that give you a guide and steps to finding your purpose, but that's really it. Tap into your experiences and who you are and think of like, what makes me the most, like, what is that one experience that made me so angry, that made me so happy, that made me frustrated, that made me want to like shut the whole thing down and do something different.
That heightened emotional state where you just feel for it deeply.
Absolutely. And you'll find that there's purpose in there, right? Something as simple as your purpose being to help other people. You can help other people as a mom, as a wife, right? As a minister, as a podcaster, as a hairdresser. You can, as a business owner, there's so many ways you can help people. And all to say, again, it's not attached to a title. It's not attached to what you look like now, because you can walk in your purpose. Even if you look like what you don't want to look like at a certain point. I know when I was a kid, I wanted to be a teacher, like my dad, right? I threw it away. It was a trivial reason. I found out that on Superintendent's Day, the teachers have to come in and the kids don't. And I was like, absolutely not. I'm not about
to come in. You have to work an extra day.
One day, or for one day, I threw the whole thing away. However, I didn't realize that I was still empowering young kids as a choir director. I do training. I built training programs in the workplace, working in diversity, equity, and inclusion. There's a level of education that comes into that, so even though I'm not in a classroom, and yes, I did my year and change in Korea in the classroom, but even though I'm not in a classroom, I'm still educating, I'm still empowering, I'm still uplifting, I am still teaching. It doesn't look like a certain thing that I defined, but again, I was able to use those experiences and say, wow, okay, these are the things I'm passionate about, and this is what makes me me. So, yeah.
Wow. This has been a wonderful conversation. I am so happy that you were able to find the time to be on here with me today.
Now when I come to New
York, I appreciate it. Time is precious. Time is precious. So to really give your time to this, it means a lot. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
And I would do it all over again. If
we definitely gotta do part 2, because there's so much more. There's so much direction that we can go with it. And I'm like, man, if I stay on here, we're gonna be here for 3 hours, and there's a time limit on this thing. They'll cut me off.
Right. No, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I want to thank you all for being here today for today's conversation with Juliette Nelson. And I hope that you can gain so much from this conversation, from learning about how to take care of your mental illness, finding your purpose, loving yourself, being worthy of being here, being present. I'm just truly grateful for your presence in our conversation today. And I hope to see you all next time. Bye, everyone.